Real esoteric spirituality without all of the fluff, without all of the nonsense. This is the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Click subscribe and then hit the little bell button so that you can be notified whenever I've uploaded a video or when I'm doing the live Q&A videos. Hello, Thunder Wizards. So I want to talk to you today about a question that I think about a lot, which is, why are the old gods returning? Like myself, I have heard from a lot of people who have told me that they started investigating polytheism because they had experiences where they had dreams or visions or visitation, or they just all of a sudden had an intense desire, an interest in the gods of our ancestors. So paganism, whether that be Celtic paganism or Nordic paganism or Hinduism or Taoism or whatever. And so the question is, well, why would somebody have this experience? I had this experience. I didn't end up worshiping the gods of my ancestors because I had a desire to do it. It wasn't a hobby of mine. I didn't think it was interesting. You know, I think there's a lot of people that I've run into who I think have gotten into heathenism and paganism for what I believe to be the wrong reasons. I think there's no shortage of people who are doing it because of political reasons and racialist reasons. And I believe, in fact, I know a large number of the heathen community, especially like in the 70s and such, that was created out of racialist and conservative politics. And there are people to this day who use the Nordic mythology in order to promote their right-wing politics, and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But I didn't get into that I didn't get into the path of my ancestors for any of those reasons. In fact, if you had asked me, say 15 or 20 years ago, if you had asked me, do you have any interest in that? I would say, nah, not really. In fact, I thought I was Celtic. I thought I was of Celtic descent. And if you had said to me, in 2015, you are going to be teaching people about Germanic polytheism and you're going to be very interested in worshiping of Odin, I would have said, no, that's not my ethnic background. I have no interest in it. And then for those of you who've read my book, my second book, The Thunder Wizard Path, you know that I had a pretty profound experience with the goddess Hulda and with Odin and with Thunar. And so it became undeniable to me that these gods were talking to me and they wanted me to transmit messages from them, which is what this whole path is about. So I'm not the only one that's had that experience. I've seen people from all walks of life and from all different ethnicities who the gods, it doesn't matter where they're from, but gods of times past have communicated with people, and they are now following polytheism, not because of any other reason other than these gods appeared to them in some way and communicated to them. So it begs the question, why is this happening? Why are people leaving Christianity in droves like never before? And why at the same time has monotheism become even more extreme than I have ever seen it in my lifetime? Never have I seen such extremes. And Christianity has become extremely polarized, and same thing with All of the monotheist religions are just becoming extremely polarized and extreme. And then we have this huge shift. Why is that happening? Well, in order to understand that, I'm going to share with you a couple of theories about why I think that's happening. One I've shared with before, and then I'll go into some more depth about what I think is really going on. And I think that what happens is that human consciousness, bear in mind that I use my words very specifically. Human consciousness goes from two extremes. It goes from the extreme of being one with infinity to worshiping one God. These are the two extremes that human consciousness goes through. And I've shared with this before about the 4 yugas. This is in Vedic mythology. It says that we go through cycles of 4 yugas, 4 epochs. And the golden epoch, the epoch of truth, is one where we are the closest to ultimate truth. We don't need to speak. We don't even need physical bodies in the sense that we do now. We don't need to do all the kinds of things that we do now. We're spiritual beings, magical, powerful. We're like gods. And then we start to become more and more dense. And we go through, let me see, what are the different yugas here? We go through Treta Yuga and Dvapara Yuga and then Kali Yuga. These are the 4 yugas. Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Now, depending on who you talk to, we are either just barely starting Kali Yuga, which will last for another like hundreds of thousands of years, or we have already left Kali Yuga and we are making our way back to Satya Yuga. I prefer the second because it makes more sense. And the thought of just starting out in Kali Yuga and having Kali Yuga get worse and worse and worse sounds really awful to me. But according to this understanding, we have 100% consciousness in Satya Yuga. And we have something like 25% consciousness in Kali Yuga. And this is because our solar system is orbiting the galactic center. So I'm not a physicist or an astronomer, so I have no idea how this relates up with actual physical science. But the idea is that our solar system is rotating in an elliptical orbit around the galactic center. The galactic center is, if for lack of a better word, we can call it God. It's the closest. When we're close to that, that's when we are most connected to supreme consciousness. And we are at our highest level of vibration, very non-physical vibration. Kali Yuga, we are, if the galactic center is here and we're rotating around, here's Satya Yuga, and then it goes all the way back right down here. Here's Kali Yuga. It goes like this, okay? So we would be right here in Kali Yuga, which would be the furthest point away from the galactic center. And then as we go through, get out of Kali Yuga, we hit Dvapara Yuga, and we're making back this way. So we want to look at, if we're in Dvapara Yuga, which I think we are, then we want to look directly across to see where things were as our solar system was moving towards Kali Yuga. As it was moving towards Kali Yuga, we want to see what we are directly across from. So we can do this, because as I said, there's at least 2 different understandings of the yugas. The one that I like to believe in says that we entered Dvapara Yuga around 1700 AD. And so Kali Yuga went from Kali Yuga went from 700 BC to 500 AD, which lines up perfectly with what we would call the Dark Ages, the medieval ages. That lines up, so the smack dab center of Kali Yuga would be medieval, the Dark Ages, when Christianity is at its full strength and people are being killed and put to death for not believing in Jesus, where you have armies going through all of Europe and massacring, entire communities and putting, knives to their throat and saying, believe in Jesus or die. Or, people in Scandinavia who refused to let go of the old gods were forced to swallow snakes and died from swallowing snakes. And, people had to convert or they would be killed. And people were tortured, and we had a society that was, you only had people at the top who lived in castles, and everybody else basically lived in filth. And so you had, this was going on during Kali Yuga, which was also the age of Pisces. Age of Pisces is the fish, and what is the symbol for Christianity? The fish. So Christianity was the religion of the age of Pisces, the age of Kali Yuga. Because what is Christianity all about? It's about guilt and torment, and you have to sacrifice yourself, prostrate yourself on the floor and give up your life to Jesus, and your life is a horrible travail you have to go through. So we can see, according to that makes a lot of sense. We can see that in history. So if we look at where we're at now, that would make us about equal with, let's see if I got this right. We're at 1700 AD. So let's see, that's about 700 years. No, wait, let's see. 500 plus 7, that's 2200 years. I tried to do this before and I forgot what my math was. Anyway, we end up right around 11,000 BC. So we want to see what was going on in the world around 11,000. 1100, let me see, I'm so bad with math, it's just ridiculous. Sorry, 1100, 1100 BC, sorry. So that means that where we're at now is equivalent to what was going on at 1100 BC. So what was happening 1100 BC? 1100 BC, you had the rise. We're just seeing the rise of empires. So you had the Egyptian. You had the Egyptian Empire. You had a few other empires that were just starting. You had the beginnings of the Greeks, who they were still. They weren't anywhere near their golden age, but they were starting to get there. The Spartans were coming into existence. The Latin tribes were starting to come together, and you see the beginnings of the Latins were the ones that ended up creating the Roman Empire later on. And so you see these bubblings of the beginnings of the age of empires. And you have the last of the worldwide polytheist religions. Now they still have a ways to go before they're completely wiped out, but the beginnings are starting to happen. It's the beginning of the end. And or I should say it's the beginning of the empirical tradition, which will eventually overcome and destroy polytheism, because that's what destroyed it. What destroyed polytheism was living in the time of empires, and monotheism became a necessary tool in order for the Roman Empire, especially, for the Roman Empire to, get world dominance at that time, because you have one God, one country, one culture. It worked out very well. You've been lied to about the nature of the matrix. What if I told you that you could hack into the matrix? I've done it, and I can teach you how to do it. Click below to watch the free video that I put on my YouTube channel a few years ago that has since gone viral. I discovered that the matrix, like everything else in the universe, operates from certain rules. There are 5 rules that govern the matrix. And then there is one secret technique that, to my knowledge, nobody else has figured out, that allows you to hack into the matrix, understanding these 5 rules and using these 5 rules to control, manipulate, and change reality so that you can have exactly what you want out of life. Don't allow yourself to be deceived by the victim mentality that has been thrust upon you by everybody in the media and in modern society, in history, in religion. You have the power to hack into the matrix, to control your life, and have the life of your dreams. Click below, watch the free video, and then learn how you can do what I've been doing for myself over the past few years. And so we had the end of Kali Yuga officially in the 1700s. And it's the 1700s that we see the Renaissance, where what happens in the 1700s? All of a sudden you have people who get interested in classical literature, classical art. In the Renaissance, you see a lot of Greek statues, and you see this resurgence of the study of polytheist mythology, and you see the rise of the destruction of empires, in the sense that now we have this new political movement, which we now call democracy. And of course, it was just in its infancy then, but that's when you first started having people starting to rebel, and it was the beginning of the age that we live in now. So in Dvapara Yuga, what you have is, you have ideally in its most powerful space, you have 50% of the population. 50% of the population is aware, and 50 is unaware. At Kali Yuga, when Kali Yuga is at its worst, you only have 25%. So 75% of the population is unaware, is disconnected. Now, so you got that in your mind, right? Here's the galactic center, and here's our solar system, and it goes like this, right? And so here is when we're closest to highest awareness, and we don't need to speak, we don't need technology. We're barely even human beings. We function on a very high level. And then as we get all the way down here to Kali Yuga, we are the furthest away. We need the most technology. We need to talk. People don't understand each other. We need war, all that. And what's interesting is when you get right around at this same time period. No, never mind. That's something else. I'm getting confused. Okay, so imagine you've got that. You see that? Hopefully you can see that in your mind. Now I want you to understand that this is just one rotation. That a full epoch is 25,000 years, 24,000 years. So we start here at Satya Yuga, which is the closest to highest awareness. And then it takes 12,500 years, boom, and then you're at Kali Yuga, another 12,500 years to get back. That's one cycle of the 4 yugas. And this keeps happening over and over and over again. And so we go through these cycles. And so if you go far enough back with this cycle, imagine this cycle just keeps happening. We go farther and farther back in time. each of those is going to get closer and closer and closer again to this highest awareness. And so what I want to propose to you is this, is that our consciousness, bear in mind, I'm not talking about human beings, I'm talking about our consciousness. What we would call human consciousness is continuously seeking to experience and learn and to grow. And so if we go far enough back, enough of these 24,000 years, and we keep going back further and further and further and further, what I'm saying is that you're going to find a period where human consciousness is not in physical form. That what we would call the soul, our essence, our human essence, which we would call the soul, is not in physical form. It doesn't need physical form. And then as we get further and further away from this cycle of, these cycles, when we get further and further away from our highest awareness and we become more and more dense, that reality becomes more and more dense. That human consciousness needs another way to experience this earth. And so in order to experience this earth, we need to incarnate. So here's what I'm saying. And, who knows if this is going to make any sense to you. I could just be talking out my ass. I don't know. But this is what was coming to me today. Because I was thinking about religion, and I was thinking about why do we go through these shifts of worshiping many gods and then worshiping one God. And so if we are in the highest vibrational essence, we go further and further back in time, and human beings are just these energy balls of consciousness that don't need physical reality in order to experience the earth. We get further and further away from that. Reality becomes more and more dense. Then these consciousnesses that we call souls have to incarnate in some avatar in order to experience life on earth. And what I'm saying here is that when we are in that primal essence of highest vibration, we don't worship any gods. We are infinite. We are everything. We are as close to God as you can imagine it. We are completely everything. We are infinite, all-knowing, all everything. So there's no need for us to become physical. But as this physical reality becomes more and more dense, we have to incarnate. So what I'm saying is that in the beginning there was no God. There was nothing. There was no gods. There was no God. There was just us, and we were God. And then as reality gets more and more dense, we have to incarnate. What I'm saying is that this consciousness, our souls, if you want to call it, needed to possess some being, have all these forms of life running around the planet Earth. And you need one that you can go into and inhabit so that you can experience what that place has to offer. What I'm saying is that we chose to take hominids, Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is what they became, but before that they were just very smart monkeys. And as they evolved and became really, really smart and started walking on two legs and started doing things to make their brains bigger and all that, and who knows, I think we had something to do with it. I think we spurred them on to start doing things that would increase their brain capacity so that we would create an avatar that we could inhabit in order to experience dense reality and enjoy it. And then as we did that, and human beings, proto-humans, go back 100,000 years. They say the first modern human was 100,000 years old. I think we experimented with with other forms of hominids. I think we experimented with uh, Neanderthals and the Denisovans. I think we experimented with them. And then I think we went and helped to create a further evolution of that, which is what we call Homo sapiens. And it wasn't until 100,000 years ago, with the rise of Homo sapiens, that you finally see, the Homo sapiens explode all over the world. And when we started inhabiting Homo sapiens, then we needed to first become shamans, which was understanding that there was a spiritual world and a physical world. And then from there, we started worshiping the gods of nature, and then we started, as we got more evolved, we started creating these polytheists, or experiencing or discovering polytheist gods. And then as we get more and more dense, and we are more and more disconnected to the source of spiritual awareness, then we become less and less able to communicate with the other realms, and we're left with only one God, which is our own ego. So if you look at monotheism, and the Hebrews were really the inventors of modern monotheism. When we look at Jehovah, the way that he expresses himself to Moses, which of course never happened, there's nothing historical about that, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it still represents something. When Moses, when Jehovah introduces himself to Moses, he tells him that there's only one God, which is him, and that you can't look for God in the sky and in the sea and in animals and under the ocean and on the earth, that you cannot worship any other gods, and if you do worship any other gods, you are going to be punished with horrible afflictions, and so thou shalt have no other gods before me. And here we have the time of the ego. And as it so happens, monotheism, as we know it, is invented right around, I believe it was 3500 BC. And before that time, the Hebrews were polytheists. It wasn't until around 3500 BC that the returning elites who were taken captive during the Babylonian captivity come back to Israel, and they bring with them this new mythology, which we know of as the Old Testament, and they bring with them this new monotheist religion. Up until that time, Jehovah was just the protector god of, first was the Midianites, and then they were adopted by the Israelites and used as the protector god of the nation of Israel. And now he's become the one and only God. And what do you see here? You see this focus on focusing on your own identity. So what it really comes down to is they're worshiping their own identity. So these are people who are struggling for their identity in a world at that time where their nation was under real serious threat of being absorbed by all the other countries and nations around them. And so in order to preserve that, they create this Zionist religion, this religion of nationalism, and they're worshiping the God of their nation, which is Jehovah. And he's not just, let's worship our own God and bring our nation together. It's such a projection. Everything is projection. They project onto it, this is the only God. There is no other God. If you don't worship this God, then you are going to be cursed and blah, 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 blah. And that is the same thing that people who have major insecurities of their own identity, that's what they do. They become very controlling, and that you either do things my way, it's my way or the highway. If you get really extreme, then you have people who are really abusive, and you get into the realm of like a serial killer, somebody who is just so focused on controlling others, they can't see anything or anybody else other than themselves. And this is what Jehovah is. He's just the ultimate narcissist. You either worship me and I'm the only thing, and not only that, you can't even make an idol out of me. You just have to, he's just so focused on me and only me. And so we go back to the two extremes. We have one extreme where somebody actually is, when you're in the depth of the greatest Satya Yuga, where somebody is closest to the center of true awareness, which is on a very high spiritual vibration, where they themselves are everything. They themselves are God. They themselves are infinite. And so in that case, there are no gods. There is one God, which is them. They are God. But they don't have to worship anything. They are everything. And then you get completely on the other end of the spectrum in Kali Yuga, where humans are in these, human souls are in these human bodies. These human bodies are the densest they've ever been and the furthest away from conscious awareness. And there's only one God to worship, which is the God of your own ego, Jehovah. You're worshiping your own ego. And that's when we get the most violent. That's when, all of the technologies and the wisdom that had been created, like the Egyptians who were able to create the pyramids. They were able to create the pyramids without any modern technology. We still don't know how they did it. We really don't. It would be very difficult for us with all of our technology now to build the pyramids. And they didn't have the kind of technology that we had. And so you have the Romans, who also had amazing technologies. They had all kinds of technologies that we're still trying to figure out some of the things that they did. Aqueducts that for hundreds and thousands of miles of aqueducts and all that kind of stuff. So we lose all of that. You had people, in Alexandria who were starting to talk about the world being round. They started talking about that the Earth orbits the sun, and they start explaining that. And then, of course, you have Christian religion comes in and burns all of the books in the Alexandria library, and people go into this state of ridiculous ignorance, where the world is created in 7 days and all that stupid shit. That's where all that comes from. So that's why we are now seeing this rise of people having spontaneous experiences with the gods of our ancestors, because what I'm saying happening here is the galactic center, and here's our planet, right? And so we were back here in Kali Yuga, or let's say we're here in Kali Yuga. We start moving back and we're in Dvapara Yuga. We go directly opposite that to around 1100, do I got that right? 1100 BC, something like that? What did I say? I forget what I said now. I think it was 1100 BC is what I said. Right around 1100 BC, then you are seeing the end of polytheism at its most powerful time. And what's happening now? People are just now beginning to awaken. So as polytheism was coming towards its end, it didn't know that yet, but it was about to start its decline. We are now coming into a phase where what's happening is people are waking up to the gods. We are aligned in the same position that our ancestors were in Dvapara Yuga, where we could say the minority of people are starting to wake up to the idea that there are all these other gods, and these gods are actually speaking to us and communicating with us. Our ancestors, on the other side of it, as they are coming out of Dvapara Yuga and heading towards Kali Yuga, the gods start to be forgotten. And less people can hear the gods, and we get more and more focused on empires and Hi, I'm Michael Denny of SpiritTao.com, and this is Celestial Negum Part 1. Celestial Negum means that this is power that is descending from heaven. And the idea is that we are all microcosms of the entire universe. You are the entire universe, and everything around you is simply the projection. You are looking within yourself. So when you look up into the stars at night, you're actually looking deep within your own body. When you look at the sun, the moon, the trees, the flowers, you're looking within yourself. This is Neko. And so what we're doing is we're simply releasing that infinity from within us. You are tapping into and releasing the power that is within our own body, our own cells, our own organs. So one of the reasons that I'm making this DVD is in the hope that the essence and the spirit of the teaching of the Shang-Ching arts can be taught to the world at large, and it is my hope that the core essence of what the Shang-Ching tradition is will continue to live and grow and evolve. As we move on into the Aquarian age, everything is changing. I don't need to tell you that. The entire world is changing, and what we are seeing now is that if people hold on to external things, they are very challenged in life. And those who are making the transition into the next phase that we are moving into in the world as we approach 2012, those who look within and find their source of strength from within, those are the people who are getting the most out of life and will make the transition into the next phase of evolution most comfortably. It is my belief that the Shang-Ching tradition is one method whereby human beings can evolve into the next level of being in the most comfortable fashion and be able to take advantage of the rapid, energetic, mental, and spiritual changes that are going on in the world today. And people, the whole thing about the Roman Empire especially, which is why Christianity arose to begin with, because as I shared about in my previous video having to do with the origins of Christianity, I talk about Gnosticism. Because a lot of people want to say, oh, Christianity, the religious Christianity, the true Christianity is Gnosticism. And I say, Gnosticism is no better. Because that whole idea of the, what do they call that? The demiurge. The whole idea that there's this separation between spiritual and physical. And that, that the demiurge is this bad, evil God, and we have to get to the good God up here. All of that is a projection of their experience of living in an empire where your culture is gone, your religion is gone, your mobility is gone. You don't have the ability to roam the world. You're now stuck in one place. You live in cities. There's no hope. And they project this onto their spiritual beliefs. And so you have this good, unreachable spiritual thing, and then you have the bad, evil, physical, or it's a projection. So that's when we start to see, before Christianity comes in, we see these Gnostic religions, which take place in areas where you have people who are being oppressed by these invading armies called Rome, who come to wipe out their culture and replace it with their own. So, I babbled on. I don't know if I've made any sense or not. So let's see. We've only got 3 people on here. Stephen Purdy asked the question. What does the Ascended Masters, ancestors, and other entities' new relationship with us be like when we reach Satya Yuga? I would have to be in Satya Yuga to answer that question. I'm not in Satya Yuga. I'm here with you in Dvapara Yuga. I can surmise what I think is probably the case, but I think the relationship is that we would be on an equal footing with them. That at the height of Satya Yuga, human consciousness is that of the elves. We're not physical beings anymore. We are You know, we're part of the spiritual elite, if you will. We're like the ascended or the celestial gods. So we would be, you know, we might be a different consciousness, but you know, it's like the elves go to Asgard, and you know, they're welcome all over that realm as well. I think that's where we would be. Um, the what was I going to say? I had something I wanted to say, and I forgot what it was. Having to do with all this stuff about elves and ascended masters and human beings and so if we're looking at these yugas, which last 24,000 years, right? And what I'm saying is that every time we go through one of these 24,000 years, which is each one of these four yugas twice, we're going towards highest awareness and then farther away. And these, you know, I'm saying that these circles even circle further and further away. And I wish I knew better how to explain it. And you know, for me, the way I would look at it is that there's these mini yugas and then a large yuga. I am of the belief that we have gone through a bunch of mini yugas and we've reached the furthest yuga, farthest away from human awareness. And if there is going to be an apocalypse, it would be during, you know, this time. I do believe that we are now making our way back, you know, making these yugas back. Anyway, so hold that in your mind. That's my thought about how things are working. So if these yugas last 24,000 years, these small yugas, then what was happening 24,000 years ago? More than that, 25,000 years ago, something like that. What was happening 25,000 years ago? An interesting thing happened in Europe 25,000 years ago. There is a cave that was recently discovered only like within the last decade. And this is the cave in what is now France that has the oldest, I believe, the oldest known cave paintings in the world. And I think they were done about 35,000 years ago. And it's 35,000 years ago, you know, this is where you find the first and oldest carved items in the world, which were found in what is now like France and Germany. So you have these people who live around this time, and they're making these paintings. These paintings are paintings of animals that live at that time. And I wish I could remember the name of that cave, but it lives at the mouth of a river. And so it basically in a canyon at the mouth of a river, and then there's this cave that goes into the side of the mountain. And so this cave ends up looking like the womb of the earth. You have like this canyon and the water coming out, and then this cave. And this cave is a deep cave that goes very deep. And so you have all of these cave paintings that go way back into all of these, you know, these places deep into the cave. And on the sides of the wall of the cave are all of the Ice Age animals that live at that time. The lions, the rhinoceroses, the elephants, the horses, the bears. And what's interesting is that the paintings, it's not like you're looking at a flat painting that something's painted on it. It's the walls of the cave. You know, the walls of the cave are jutting out in a certain way that they kind of look like an animal. So they painted an animal over that. And they did that throughout the whole cave. And what's interesting, what's different about this cave than some of the other Stone Age caves in Europe is that in some of the Stone Age caves in Europe, you have these animals, and then you can see these chips in the side of the wall of the cave where people are doing rituals and they're hurling spears, you know, at the animals. And you can see it's a shamanic ritual to give them power to go, and they're trying to do a spell to bring that animal to them so they can kill them and eat. You don't see that in this cave. You just see all of these different animals in all of their natural settings, and they're naturally coming out of the walls of the cave. There's no humans. There's no painting of any human in this cave. When you go all the way to the furthest reaches of the cave, all the way in the back, there's a stalactite, I think that's what they're called, coming out of the top of the cave. And on one side of that cave is an oryx. I mean, on that stalactite is an oryx. And on the other side, you have what we now know, one of the earliest statues ever made by humans, is of the Venus of Willendorf, if you know what that is. It doesn't have, it's a female body with exaggerated breasts and a large womb area and, you know, legs spread. It's like, it doesn't have feet, it doesn't have a head, it doesn't have arms, it's just this woman's torso. It represents the earth mother goddess. It represents fertility. You can't get more clear about that. And that is on the other side of the oryx. So the oryx represents what we still have in Indo-European mythology as in the Norse, it's Audhumla, the wealth-giving cow. You have the same thing in the Vedic tradition. The Vedic tradition has the same cow. I forget what they call it. It's the same thing. And it represents the mother's teats, the teats of the cow representing nourishment. So on the other side of this oryx is this Venus of Willendorf. That's the closest you get in that cave to the representation of a human being. So it's obviously not a human being. It represents Mother Earth. And so they're saying that this cave is the womb of Mother Earth. And what they are doing in this cave is they are painting. They are bringing to life what they see. Imagine they're coming in with torches. And they're coming into this cave, and so the torches are dancing off of the walls. So these, you know, what the protrusions in the side of the cave, it's going to look to them like the animals are moving, wanting to be birthed. So what do? They paint what they see in the side of these caves. They paint them in there. They probably did rituals to bring these animals to life.
Okay, so be honest with me. You have tried practicing the law of attraction in your life. You have sat on the edge of your bed and you have focused on positive feelings and focused on bringing up good feelings about things that you want in your life, and you've had little or no results. If you're honest, in my experience, the majority of people who have really tried to use the law of attraction to manifest their dreams have been disappointed, and in some cases outright frustrated, and in some cases their lives got worse. Now there is an actual reason for that, and that is because the law of attraction actually doesn't work unless it is combined with the law of manifestation. And sadly, most of the law of attraction teachers out there, many of them well-intentioned, are only giving half of the recipe for being successful when it comes to intending and manifesting your life. My name is Michael William Denny of the ThunderWizard.com YouTube channel. And just like you, years ago, I tried sitting on the edge of my bed and focusing on positive feelings. I tried to keep myself in a positive state of mind, and very little happened. And as a result, it was very hard for me to keep those positive feelings coming. And then I was told that, well, you have negative things in your life because you're focusing on too many negative things. But the problem was I couldn't turn my negative feelings off. But here's something that I've learned, and this is incredibly important. I want you to listen to this. You don't have to monitor your feelings. You can have all kinds of negative feelings. You can have sadness, you can have fear, you can have resentment, all of these so-called negative feelings that are supposed to bring you all kinds of negative things. You can have these feelings, and if you know how to practice the law of manifestation, it doesn't matter how you feel. And that to me was so liberating, Because listen, there's a lot of people out there feeling guilty and feeling unspiritual because they do have less than perfect feelings. And when things aren't manifesting the way they want, guess what happens? Naturally, you have negative feelings coming up. And if you've been told that your negative feelings will bring negative things, then you are then filled in with this feeling of guilt and shame, and then you go into this cycle of guilt and shame, and you can never get out of it. And it doesn't matter how many seminars you go to, or how many books you read, or how many videos you watch of people telling you if you focus on positive things will happen. None of that matters, because now you're filled with all of these negative feelings, and then you're afraid to take any action, and then nothing happens in your life. So I'm here to free you from all of that. It doesn't matter how you feel. The only thing that matters is, do you know how to properly intend? And that is what the law of manifestation is. When you combine that, then guess what happens? You start to have some positive feelings come back into your life, and then guess what happens? Then you can merge the law of attraction, because you can take those positive feelings and you can merge it with the law of manifestation, and you can focus that energy into your intentions. And then, in my experience, the law of attraction and the law of manifestation works every time. It has worked for me. I'm sitting here in front of my house. I'm not kidding you. My house is right over there. And I simply walked out of the front door of my house this morning and decided to make a video and tell you my experience of the law of manifestation and the law of attraction. So, if you want to get started, click the link and go to thunderwizard.com and look for the Manifestation Mastery course, and click on that to get started.
And then sure enough, that was the womb of the mother. This was their way of preserving the earth. The fact that you don't see any paintings of human beings in this cave means they didn't see themselves as being creations of animals. They didn't see themselves. They saw themselves as protectors. They saw themselves as, like we would look at the elves, they saw themselves as protectors of the earth. They didn't think to themselves that they were part of that. They thought to themselves that they were spirits walking around earth, and they were doing the job of protector spirits. And this is towards the, at the end of that Yuga, where it started to fall into Treta Yuga. It's right around that time. It was about 25,000 years ago. At that same time, around 25,000 years ago, according to who you talk to, depending on who you talk to, that's when the pyramids were built. Now, even if you don't believe in any of the crazy, weird things you hear about the pyramids, we know that the pyramids, there are all kinds of things built underneath the pyramids. There's all kinds of tunnels and all kinds of things, and that water came right up to the Nile came right up to the mouth of, the big pyramids there. And the pyramids were not, as, academia will try and tell you, the pyramids were not tombs. There's nothing in there. There's a central chamber in there, but there's nothing in there to tell you that that's a tomb. Nothing. And even Hitler spent the night in there, and whatever happened to him in that central chamber of the tomb in the big pyramid messed him up so bad he never talked about it. And so what people will say is that those pyramids were built back then using the water of the Nile in order to create this capacitor, this antenna that was supposed to go over the whole world to keep the whole world in its awareness of Satya Yuga, the awareness being fully connected to the awareness of the infinite. And it failed. That it was a failed attempt. They were trying really hard. They knew that they were about to lose their awareness, And they didn't want that, so they tried to create this antenna which they could spread all over the earth, which would maintain humans' awareness, and of course it fell apart. It was right around this same time that people were in Europe creating these caves, which were really centers of creating the animals and protecting the animals. Right around 25,000 years ago, that cave system I'm telling you about, there was a landslide that covered it over, completely covered it over, and it wasn't discovered again until like 10 years ago, when somebody was spelunking and there had been another landslide which opened things up, and they went in, and this guy walks in and he sees this huge, all these cave paintings, and and he said when he walked in that he could feel people watching him, and that he could feel that there were people in there watching him. He couldn't see anybody. There's the ancestors, of course. That was a power place of the ancestor spirits. They lived. This being open up, the fact that this has now been opened up means that the ancestors are coming back. They're opening themselves up and coming back to us to communicate to us, so that we can follow through and continue back towards Satya Yuga. So your question sparked me with that, that we can think of our Stone Age ancestors as being really primitive, and maybe they were. Maybe they didn't have the same technologies that we had. Maybe they lived in huts and all that kind of stuff, but they also didn't need the same kind of stuff that we do now because of their spiritual awareness. So, something to think about. Stephen Purdy question: would those cycling away yugas be like the spiral of the phi ratio? I think so. Let me see what that looks like. I'm going to type that into Bing here and see what comes up, and see if I can see a picture of what you're talking about. Yeah, that's a great way. The golden ratio, yeah, the golden mean. Yeah, that is a great way of expressing it. I would say that expresses what I'm trying to say here extremely well. Yep. Okay, so that's my thought about that. Something to think about. And when we're talking about Dvapara Yuga, Dvapara Yuga, you have 50% of the population that's aware, and 50 that aren't. And this is the most polarized I've ever seen. I've never seen, in my 55 years, have I ever seen politics so polarized. I mean, there's always been, as long as I've been alive, there's always been only two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. And they've always been at each other's throat, and it's always been nonsense. They both are, trying to appease their own bases, and nobody's working together, and nobody says, hey, let's come together for the benefit of the country. That's been going on since as long as I can remember. But never in my life have I seen such total, utter division never. And so this is what you're going to see. It's like when, and by the way, snow in Los Angeles, I don't know if you guys have seen that, but there's, I think yesterday, it was so cold yesterday. I think it was yesterday that snow, and I saw it. I could see it from where I was. I could see these storm clouds over, the Santa Monica Mountains. I could see it from where I was at. We didn't get a whole lot of rain, but it was so freaking cold. I didn't feel like I was in California at all. I can't remember it ever being this cold. And it was snowing up in the Santa Monica Mountains, I find out today. And the Santa Monica Mountains are basically hills. They're only a couple thousand feet high, which here is nothing. The mountains here that get snow are 10,000 feet or higher. That's where, if you want to go skiing, you go up to these 10,000 foot mountains. So these hills around us at a couple thousand feet are getting snow. Just nuts. It's so cold. Anyway, so by the way, that is climate change. Climate change doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get hotter everywhere all the time. It means that we have this huge shift in climate where it's super hot in the summer, and then we get these crazy cold blasts in the winter. This is what they were telling us in the 70s. They said, here's what global warming is going to look like. The poles are going to get warmer, and in the middle, you're going to have these crazy shifts of weather and storms, and it's everything that they said was going to happen. You know, back when I was a kid, 30 years ago, they said this was going to happen. All right, so that's it. I don't see any more questions. We will keep it there for now. Here's my recommendation for everybody. If you haven't already done so, I would recommend going to, this will be up here after I put it back up there on YouTube, neo.thunderwizard.com. Here's where I recommend everybody go. Here's my plan for this channel and for this path. What we're going to do is, I want you guys to have 4 tools. And these 4 tools are going to be necessary to becoming a wizard that can create through their intention. And that is, number 1, you need to know what your destination is. Where you need to, people think they know where they want to go in life, what they want to be. You first have to know what that is, and there's a specific way of figuring that out. So that's tool number 1. The second is you're going to need a vehicle. We live in a universe that is made up of life force energy. You're going to need life force energy to be able to create and manipulate life force energy. So that's the second tool. The third tool is you're going to need to know the rules of the road. You know where you're going, you have your map, your destination, you have your vehicle, which is power, and now you're going to need to know how to navigate. This is the 5 rules to master the matrix. If you understand that, regardless of how you feel, you know, people want to get into how do they feel successful and I can believe in myself. You don't need to do any of that. You can be as screwed up and full of doubt as anybody. And as long as you know the rules of the road, you know how the matrix, the universe responds, then you can command it to do whatever you want, regardless of how you feel. And then the 4th tool is the Patreon channel. And that we're talking about the manifestation mastery exercise. That's the 4th one, but that's not what it's going to be completely on. Because remember, we've got this whole channel on Patreon that I don't even know how many videos now I put up there, which basically spells everything out, from ritual to the thunder wheel, the 8 directions, the energies, the runes, chanting, mantra, all that stuff, shamanism on all levels, talking about all the stuff that I've done for the past couple of years. We've got that whole body of knowledge there, which I take you from beginning to end on how to become a master shaman, especially in the northern tradition. And now we're going to talk about how to take the awareness to create reality whenever we want it. So what I'm going to do on the Patreon channel is I'm going to start doing live Q&As there just for subscribers who are at the manifestation mastery level or above. And we'll see what happens, but I first have to be able to do live Q&As on YouTube, which will happen, I think, in about a month. And so then I'll start scheduling these things so that people who have practiced all of these things, who have read the books, who have gotten the different video teachings and have been practicing them and understand what I'm teaching, can go and then really ask me like these kinds of questions in depth. Because once I start going back on YouTube, because I'm getting a lot more subscribers and I start doing Q&As, there's going to be a lot of people coming on who don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. They're going to be asking me all kinds of general questions and silly questions, and so I want to be able to answer them at their level. I want to be able to answer the people who have been following me for a while at their level. So those are the 4 tools, and to get all of that, I recommend you go to neo.thunderwizard.com, and you'll be able to see which ones of those video series you already have or don't have. And I recommend you get all 4 of them. If you don't have any of them, you got this great opportunity. You can save $100 and get the first 3 of those tools and save $100, and then The fourth one is an ongoing one, a study for all of us. So that's the update. A lot of things probably going to be changing. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunities for people. I'm looking into, we'll see, this may or may not happen, but I'm looking into seeing about affiliates and creating ways for people to become affiliates and sell things like celestial qigong and all that kind of stuff, and make everybody some money. But we'll see if that turns into anything. It might not. All right, that's it for now, and I will talk to you guys later.